spent months researching land-grant HBCU underfunding. The result? A 20-page report detailing decades of neglect, loopholes, and billions of dollars owed.
Across the nation, HBCUs have been underfunded more than $12 billion. As land-grant universities, these institutions have fund matching agreements with their states, but the states do not appear to be holding up their end of the bargain.
The numbers are staggering, but reports, statistics, and hearings haven't been enough to stop the erosion of these institutions. They haven't been enough to stop the assault on higher education, opportunity, and Black excellence. But the numbers alone don't tell the story. The people do. Land-grant HBCUs have produced world-class doctors, engineers, teachers, business leaders with access to only a fraction of the funding of their white counterparts.
The university's impact amounts to an impressive $2.4 billion in output.
HBCUs are engines of economic mobility in our country, raising the standard of living for everybody.
So the question I have for America is, why should they have to struggle to do it?
For me, A&M wasn't just a school. It was a family tradition. My mom went there. My uncle was a drum major. And some of my earliest memories are of the drum majors high-stepping, leading the band. To me, A&M was simply a place that felt like home. But there was a whole city I had yet to explore. So I hopped in my car and headed to the University of Alabama at Huntsville across town. As I drove onto campus, I noticed a couple of differences. They had these lush green spaces, these fountains that just sprang forth. And meanwhile, across town, many of our buildings needed upgrades. The heat was busted in some classrooms. The shuttle never seemed to be running on time. And some of this you might have chalked up to the grumblings of a melodramatic student who had seen the other side and believed the grass was greener. But once I was no longer a student, I learned that my experience was not an anomaly. America's colleges and universities have a dirty open secret. Higher education is organized so that the institutions with the fewest minority students have the most money. They've never given Black colleges an equal chance to succeed. This is not by coincidence, but by design. To understand it all, we have to go back in time to the creation of land-grant universities. From its inception, the state higher education system we recognize today was not built on equality, but on training a white workforce. Black students were excluded. It wasn't until the Second Rural Act of 1890 that states were required to support or establish institutions for Black students. Some of the names you probably know, like Alabama A&M, Florida A&M, and North Carolina A&T. The act, while well-intentioned, included some vague language, which allowed states to exploit loopholes and provide unequal funding to Black and white land-grant institutions.
Public schools of North Carolina are part and parcel of our state and its great progress. I shall do all I can to preserve them, but let no one be misled as to how I personally feel about mixing the races in the school. I'm unalterably opposed to it, and I intend to continue seeing that our state uses every lawful and proper means to prevent it.
For generations now, HBCUs have been underfunded. Yet despite that, they continue to produce world-class scholars, researchers, and leaders. Dr. Jelani Favors is one of them.
People look at A&T and say, they're doing great. The campus looks fine, enrollment is growing. But we've done so much in spite of. We've done so much in spite of segregation and underfunding and neglect. But at some point, it has to stop being in spite of. At some point, it has to be pay us what you owe us. These schools aren't just surviving, they're thriving. Here in North Carolina alone, North Carolina A&T contributes $2.4 billion to the state economy. That's more than some entire industries. Nationwide, public HBCUs account for $10.8 billion in economic impact and contribute more than 130,000 jobs. In spite of this impact, when you look at how R1 research dollars are being allocated, land-grant HBCUs are being left behind.
Let's talk about that for a second. What exactly is R1 status? R1 status is a prestigious classification for universities that conduct research. Colleges are ranked based in tiers based off of their research output. And those at the highest tier with R1 status are the institutions that receive the most research funding. But how do you get to R1 status? Well, first, you have to have tons of research funding. But how do you get the research funding? Well, you kind of got to have R1 status. It's kind of like being a part of a VIP club when there's only select institutions on a guest list. And unfortunately, HBCUs weren't invited. And once you're in the club, you get more and more research funding. And for everyone else, well, good luck.
A bitter disappointment.
There are over 100 HBCUs across the country, and 19 of them are a part of the Land Grant Act of 1890. And not one has been granted R1 status. It's not just about prestige. It's about resources, faculty, and research dollars that should be going to these institutions. Because when the funding isn't there, students feel it. Not just in research labs, but in lecture halls.
I came to North Carolina A&T State University to study African American history. I studied abroad in Ghana this past summer. It was a great experience. I was able to immerse myself in the culture. And not only did I learn about the country, but I was able to learn about myself and my heritage. While I was searching for funding to support my trip to Ghana, I found out if you're not in STEM, there's barely any funding for you. Land-grant HBCUs weren't built to just teach science and engineering. They were built to educate the whole student. Everyone struggles for resources. That's how it is. But when entire programs are left to scrape by, while millions of dollars are poured into STEM expansion, you start to see the bigger picture. What happens when we don't fund history, when we don't invest in Black studies? We don't just lose programs, we lose our purpose. We erase ourselves.
In the race for research dollars, students like Sloan are too often on the losing end of the funding equation. So I wanted to know, what would real progress actually look like? What needs to change? I spoke with Dr. Catherine Weedle to help me understand.
While we recognize that this fight isn't new, let's also recognize that we have the momentum to fix it. One of the most important victories happened in Maryland, where after years of legal battles, the state settled for $577 million to its 4 HBCUs. Tennessee is another case. They're owed $544 million, and while lawmakers have discussed a $250 million payout, they haven't received it yet.
Hundreds of millions of dollars TSU did not get as a land-grant university won't exactly be paid back. However, a committee decided today that the state will help restore the school to its full potential.
It's progress, but it's also proof that winning isn't the same as getting paid.
I think one thing we can be clear about is that there was underfunding.
Some lawmakers are finally paying attention. Some alumni coalitions are considering lawsuits, and some states are developing HBCU caucuses. But in every room, the same question gets asked. What's it gonna take to finally fix the problem? Right now, Congress has a chance to fix these disparities through targeted funding and policy reforms. First, research funding. Land-grant HBCUs need direct investments in labs, faculty, and graduate programs because you can't compete for R1 status without them.
I rise tonight to talk about an essential infrastructure investment, an investment in our 8 historically Black colleges and universities.
Second, extension programs. They're part of the land-grant mission, and they've been underfunded for decades.
This bill is an absolutely crucial piece of legislation. It represents the #1 priority of our minority-serving institutions which educate nearly 30% of all undergraduate students in America.
Third, institutional grants. These are the core dollars that help HBCUs retain faculty, support students, and keep the lights on. Right now, they're far too low and far too unequal.
Our choice is clear. We can choose to act.
Of all of the civil rights, for which the world has struggled and fought for 500 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. In spite of not being fully prepared academically, North Carolina A&T took me in. They molded and shaped me into what they knew I could become. Had they not done that, I would not be sitting here today or walking the halls of Congress.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a 2024 report from the Century Foundation that outlines studies that show that HBCUs provide an incredible return on investment.
Education is not a partisan issue. Our land-grant institutions are critical to the survival of our country. As citizens, we need to work together to push our elected officials to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do.
Are there ways that you could look at to incentivize required state matches to HBCUs as the executive order states? Because currently that's not being done.
We've got to have some permanent fixtures in the state budgets and in our federal budgets. We can do better about providing the matching dollars. You cannot tell me that these schools, our HBCU land grants, that they don't produce greatness. I am a living witness.
These institutions have been discriminated against for decades and decades. Imagine what would be possible if we had given them the resources they deserved. We celebrate their success, but we haven't paid what it takes to sustain it. What does it say about us? That we expect progress without investment. What is the price of excellence?